Hey everyone, it's Rachel Martin here, Oceana Wines. This is our Tuesday office hour for our Tasting Room Live. And our guest tonight is Rich Cook, Executive Director of the many different wine competitions, but he is a judge. And let's see, Rich, how many competitions do you run?
That's a good question. That's quite a stack here. I direct four of what are known as the Robert Whitley Challenge Series competitions. I am also the founding director of the Toast of the Coast competition at San Diego County Fair. I also direct the Monterey International Wine Competition, and I've even got the San Diego homemade wine competition that I direct as well. So we're bringing up winemakers who are starting in their garage, and we've had several over the years actually go pro, find that large fortune and turn it into a small one, so to speak.
So how long have you been doing this?
I got involved in the wine competition arena back in the late 1980s. As a volunteer, working what was then the San Diego National Wine Competition, which at that time was one of probably about 5 or 6 competitions nationwide. Those were the days back then when there wasn't so much competition among competitions for entries. Today there are 2 or 3 competitions every weekend somewhere across the United States. So there are plenty of opportunities to get your wines in front of people in a blind format.
Yeah, that's what it really seems like, because when you research all the different wine competitions, there are so many that it's hard to know which ones to enter. And I, coming from Boxwood Winery in Virginia, we did a little bit of entry into some competitions, but since Virginia's was a new category nationally, at the time we didn't do a whole lot of it. But when I started making wine in California, it became more attractive to me, and it seemed like a great way to reach, as many people, more people than I normally would. So it really helped establish our brand at a young age. And so the first one that we entered was the San Diego. Is it International Wine Challenge? Is that?
Yes.
So some of them get a little bit wordy.
Exactly. You have the place name, and then you have the things that are tied to it, whether it's localized, just something that's in a state or region, or all the way up to international. And then, competition's just a long word.
It is. And so challenge was kind of nice because it takes it out of not a different category, but it modernizes it a little bit. So wondering, the recent passing of Stephen Spurrier, who was just such an icon in the wine industry and such an important person, authority when it came to wine and bringing California wines to the rest of the world. That was such an important competition, and it was polarizing and everything. But when you do your competitions or create these, or when you started in the 80s, were you inspired by the story of the Paris tasting?
I think certainly that had a huge impact on what was happening at the time, with the oldest competitions like LA County Fair or the San Francisco Chronicle competition that have been around longer even than the San Diego competition, which is coming up on its 40th year here in the next year or two. To look at the idea that what really makes a wine stand out is 100% in the glass, and to get through all of the hype that gets that surrounds wine through marketing and ways of attracting people, whether it's a loud label that jumps off the shelf in the store, or some other kind of whimsical marketing program that when it comes down to it, in judgings, the feeling is that the consumers is really after what's in the glass that's going to please them. And in a blind situation where you take those other factors out of the equation and try to have things as neutral as possible when wines are being tasted, that the hope is that those things that are the best will rise to the top in that situation. It used to be years ago in competitions or just in wine in general. I mean, if you think back to the early 1980s, before Kendall Jackson Chardonnay came along and really changed the whole marketplace for wine, people were looking for wines that were nice to drink, that didn't have any problems. And back then, wines had a lot more problems than they have today. We've come so far from a chemistry and farming standpoint in the world of wine that the standards that are allowable in the marketplace have risen a great deal. So to see that come forward in a blind situation where today, we see a much higher percentage of wines getting top awards because the entire wine category has improved in quality so much over the past 30 to 40 years.
That's really true. And so when you do award these medals, what does the platinum mean? What is a double gold? What are all of the different levels of medals that you give out?
That's a great question. And it varies a lot from competition to competition, depending on who has put things together, how they want things to roll out. With the advent of scores becoming such an important part of what the consumer looks at when they go to purchase a wine. Today, we do, at the competitions that I work, we've stopped giving out bronze medals because again, the quality of wine overall has improved so much that just about 100% of things that get entered into competitions are worthy of a bronze medal, at a minimum. They're industry standard wines with no flaws that a lot of people enjoy drinking. So, we finally started to get feedback from wineries saying, hey, stop sending us bronze medals. They're in a box in the back of the tasting room and nobody cares. So we just bump things up a notch to start with a silver medal and then go on up to, in our competitions, what we call a platinum medal. Some competitions would call that a double gold, something that rises up. And when we instruct our judges, the way that we go about it is to say that a judge tasting a wine blind should, if they're going to award a wine a silver medal, they should think of that as a wine that they would be more than happy to serve to their friends, meaning it's probably a cut above standard because after all, these are people who are in the industry who know something about wine. And if they think, wow, this is good enough to serve to my friends, then it's worthy of, a good medal. It's worthy of getting some recognition. And then we tell them if you're going to take it up to the next level, if you're going to give something a gold award, meaning thinking of it in terms today of scoring as being somewhere above 90 points, then maybe that's a wine that you wouldn't serve to just any of your friends, but maybe you would save that for your friends who are really into wine and are going to appreciate some of the nuance or power that comes with that particular wine. And then for the top awards going up, into the, say, 94 points and above, I usually tell them, this is a wine that you're probably either going to drink yourself or maybe with the other judges in this room who are real appreciators of something fine, and just sort of level it out from there. And then from there, we kind of back away and think about things like putting numbers to those things, because in the competition world, we're trying to serve both the producers by giving them a fair shake when their wines are presented in front of panels of judges, and we also have a responsibility to the consumer to say, these are the things that are good, and finding a balance between those two things without going overly technical into how wines are made, and appreciating what's going on in the market and how those things affect uh, what people drink is an important factor in it as well.
Do you go by a certain scoring system or a way to evaluate the wines? What do your judges do that? Do you have a standard set?
In general, most judges think in terms of the Davis 20-point scale, just as a reference frame. When they taste a wine, they're looking for things like, color, clarity, bouquet, aroma, overall impression, bitterness, tannin, and acidic structure, all of those things. I would say to distill that down to one thing, what they're looking for is balance in a way that lets the wine really tell you something about itself. If a wine isn't identifiable by its varietal name in the glass, then while it still might be pleasurable to drink, if the consumer is going in and saying, well, I'm buying a dry Riesling, and something that was entered as a dry Riesling really doesn't seem to fit that category, then it might not get as high an award as it may if it was just a couple of people sitting around having a glass going, wow, this is a really tasty glass of white wine, instead of thinking of it in terms of a specific category. So that's a fact.
So is it, are the competitions really for the consumer, or are they for the producer?
We try in the things that we're putting on to make it for both sides of it. The producer, rather, if they don't feel like they're getting a fair shake in a judging, then there's no incentive for them to enter their wines. They're hopeful to get an accolade that they can use when they're trying to market the product. I hear a lot from people who make wine. They say, making wine really isn't all that complicated, but selling wine is another story entirely. And when you look at just the huge quantity of SKUs, we say, or individual products in the marketplace, not just from the United States, but from countries all over the world, to try to get yourself heard above the noise of everything that's out there. Wineries are looking for different ways to get heard, to find a way to get their product in front of people, and make friends, so to speak, make friends and customers that will last for a while. So I think there's a responsibility that's pretty even on both sides for people who are putting the competitions on. And if we didn't make it attractive for producers, then we wouldn't be able to hold anything. They have to be incentivized to participate for some reason, and then we have to give the consumer accurate information, the best that we can, in a way that is accessible to them and understandable to them. That's one of the things that we offer in our competitions, in addition to awards and scores, is for our top winners. We like to include a full-blown review of a wine that really gets into the details of it. Scoring tends to be relative. You hear talk of score inflation because of competitions all the time. And when you're going into a competition, because of the nature of the beast, if you want to have a winner in a category, you don't necessarily want to lower a score that someone has gotten. But when you start narrowing things down, some of the top scores will creep up, and that kind of is the competition aspect of it, judging. I like to think of the events more as celebrations of wine than competitions. In the sporting event sort of a vein, there are plenty of good products out there, and I think it's a value to the consumer to say, well, this wine got 95 points, that wine got 95 points, which one should I buy? Well, then it comes down to a description of the wine. In my mind, what do you want to do with that wine, and how can our descriptions help you decide a good place for that?
Right. I feel like without a review or, some descriptor, that the metals really don't have a lot of value, at least for the consumer, because what does a gold or a platinum mean if it still doesn't tell you anything about the wine? So I really feel that there's a great value to that as a producer, that if you're going to be awarded a medal, there at least be some more information for the consumer to use in order to make those decisions when they're purchasing. However, I like to say just buy both.
Sure.
You
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. The idea, one of the competitions that we run is called the Critics Challenge, where all of the judges are wine writers. So we give them the additional task when they're tasting of not only giving the wine a medal and perhaps a score, but then adding a short comment that would have their name affixed to it that gives a brief description of the wine. And then if it rises to our platinum level, then we give a more fleshed out full review from another panel that's looking at those wines to kind of sift out what the best of the best are from that particular event.
So how does someone decide what challenge to or competition to enter? How are they different?
It's a really good question as well. Most judgings have panels of judges that are made up of people from all different facets of the industry. You might have writers involved, you might have marketing people involved, you might have sommeliers involved, you might have people who come at it more from the restaurant side, like sommeliers. You have certainly technical people in the industry, winemakers. So most of the judgings that you'll see will have some kind of a combination of those on a panel. My favorite judging panels that I ever set up were 4-person panels where we had one winemaker, one marketing person, one sommelier, and one critic on each panel. So you really got a great take from 4 very different facets of the industry. But then
What competition was that?
that was one of the Toast of the Coast competitions.
Yeah, that sounds great. I like that.
It really is great because you get it's a great cross section of the technical aspects of the wine that you get from winemakers who tend to be the biggest critics of wines, maybe the harshest judges, for lack of a better word, because that's what their job is. When they taste a wine, the first thing they're looking for is what's wrong with this wine and how do I fix it? That's a winemaker's job, to nurse things along, and when problems crop up, to be able to adjust the wine as it goes to make it work out well. Where the marketing person is thinking more in terms of, well, this is what's hot right now. Certain eras, it's, white Zinfandel is going to be the next hot thing, something that's got a little sweetness to it. And while that may not be the favorite of any of us who are judging wine at the time, we still want to be able to tell consumers in that category, here's a really nicely made wine in that style that sort of hits that balance marker where it's not just syrupy sweet. It's got some sweetness to it, but it's also got acidic balance, and it's something that you could actually use when you're thinking of putting menus together, whether that menu is appetizers or just a chair next to the pool on a hot day. And factoring all of those things into it, those kinds of panels will get that. So in the challenge series, we offer 4 different setups. One of our judgings is called the Winemaker Challenge, where all of the judges are winemakers. So that's for people who are really looking for that little bit of technical feedback. Maybe if I know a certain pride from a winery who takes a platinum away from the Winemaker Challenge because they think, wow, we've got winemakers from around the country or different regions within even just the West Coast to look at, hey, here, these people coming from different places could all come to an agreement that this is a really nicely put together wine. We
So
mentioned.
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh no, that's all right. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, how do you get the judges? Do they apply for it? Is it invitation only? And then also, just can you describe how the whole event takes place, how the whole competition takes place, and all the logistics involved?
Oh, sure. Selecting judges is really a critical part of the equation. You need people who are great tasters, number one. And for the most part, over the years, we're selecting judges that we've either tasted with personally or come highly recommended from someone that we've tasted with personally that we know not only has a great palate, but there's a factor that I like to call working and playing well with others that
Right.
has to factor into the equation, because you have to be able to come to a compromise on a panel that has 3 or 4 judges. If you're asking them to come to a consensus, people have to be willing to move and see the other arguments rather than just entrench themselves at a particular score just because that's their feeling. We want them to have strong opinions, but we also want them to be able to listen to other opinions and take on board and maybe retaste a wine that they might have missed something with, and have that discussion and make sure the wine gets the best shake that it can. So that selection process is really important. Logistics, wow.
It must be tough.
I think everybody should come and see a back room of a judging work sometime, just to see all of the moving parts that are in play to get things happening in a blind situation where the judge is basically getting either a glass or a set of glasses in front of them that can be tasted through, and then that we can assure that the correct result is going with the wine that was judged. So everything has to be, numbered up in specific ways. And cut that off here. Got all these
right.
all these tied
You're
together.
so busy, so busy.
Yeah, that was actually another person calling that I am running one of the competitions with. So it's never ending.
Awesome.
All the logistics
Awesome.
that go on with it. So wines come in. A winery enters their wines, and it might be 1 or 2 wines from a winery. It may be over 100 wines from a larger wine company that come in.
Right, of course, like an importer or something.
Sure. And then my job as the director is to make sure all of those wines are correctly entered into our data system and are categorized correctly based on variety, if they're blends, what the residual sugars are, so that you don't have wines that are overly sweet being tasted right next to wines that are overly dry, because that affects the showing of both of those wines. So I touch literally every bottle that gets sent in for each of the competitions and make sure that everything is correct in the system. Then the wines have to be put into flights, paneled up for the different judging panels to be able to taste them. We've got data entry people that are live during the competition that are putting the scoring back into the system, and then
Wow.
able to generate results quickly so that wineries and consumers know right away, because wine is something of a perishable product. You're talking about one vintage, and if it shows well, that's good news for wineries, because the consumer will see that, the phone will ring, and before you know it, you have to start bottling the next vintage.
So how many people are we talking about, and are they all volunteers? Like Roxanne's saying, here's to the volunteers, Roxanne Jones. So she's giving props to the volunteers.
Yeah, Roxanne is one of my great volunteers, and certainly this doesn't happen without a lot of volunteers. It's been interesting over the last year because of the COVID-19 situation, what we've had to do with the number of people that we can have in a particular space to be able to judge the wines. We have run with crews as large as maybe a dozen judging panels where we've got 3 judges at a panel. There's a table monitor at each table. We've got one person serving each one of those judges. So we can get up, to a total of judges and volunteers into the 100 people range. During COVID, when we could only have, 5 people in a space that was built for 50, we had to sort of rethink the way that we were doing things. And it's interesting. It's going to be interesting going forward. I think, like so many things that have happened during COVID, things like, being able to do Facebook Live, that are going to stick with us. We've changed up some of our operations to accommodate COVID-19 protocols to get the state to allow us to proceed, that we'll probably stick with, because we've found that they'll streamline processes a little bit, and we've found in some cases that we're getting better results through slightly different practices. So in a way, it's a good shakeup for things that just tend to be, wine is one of those old school things that you start doing something some way and you don't even necessarily think about, well, how could this be done better? And then something forces your hand and you go, wow, how come we haven't been doing this for years?
Exactly. Or even say with live streams, what we're doing right now, because of COVID, I'm able to reach out to more people and start a conversation that, anyone can now have a talk show, to be honest.
Exactly.
But it's great because, consumers, they want as much information they can possibly get about, whatever products that they purchase. And then wine, of course, because there's such a mystery behind wine and wine tasting and wine judging and wine rating. So
Sure.
it's nice to expose some of those points to viewers or to wine consumers. Now, I know you've been to Spanish Springs Vineyard, and that's the vineyard where Oceano Wines, our winery, it's our sole source of fruit, because it's such a fantastic site with geology, proximity to the ocean, and the clone selection, so the plant material. I have our Pinot Noir in the glass. Rich, do you have one of
I
our
have the Chardonnay in my glass.
Which is just awesome. I have the 2019 vintage of Pinot. I'll have to send you a bottle. You haven't tasted this yet, but you did taste our 18 and gave us a real nice write-up. And, obviously I appreciate that. And you were on site at the vineyard yourself. Can you speak a little bit about, what you thought?
Yeah, it's really a great spot. It's just off Price Canyon Road, if I remember correctly, a road that travels west to east from Pismo Beach, straight out to Edna Valley. So it kind of goes up over a hill and then back down, and the Spanish Springs vineyard is a really multifaceted property, lots of different exposures as far as sunlight and slope and all of those things. And it's so close to the ocean, but not so close that it doesn't really benefit from a lot of sunshine during the day. I think you mentioned when I went out there to look for the fog line, try to hit at a certain time where you could just see the fog line and watch it disappear. And then if you stuck around long enough during the day, you would see that line return for the evening. I heard an interesting description from a winemaker one time saying that, there was a factor of that kind of a site where the fog would just roll in and out of the vines being bathed in moisturizer, all the time.
Right. It's like going to the spa.
Really good skin. Exactly. It's something that really keeps the acidity up in the grapes, which I think is really a hallmark of this vineyard, certainly in the style that your wines are being made. It's that great bright acidity that is able to carry really deep flavors in the wines in really elegant fashion. There's
Yeah,
nothing
that's
overwrought about these. They're all just really finely built for food kinds of wines that I really enjoy.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I mean, our winemaker, his name is Marbu Mark, and you know, I when I first discovered the vineyard because of our friend who owns the vineyard, Henry Warshaw, it had all the factors that I knew could produce really delicious wines with great acidity, great food wines, and depth of flavor. And it's the region there is a newly proposed AVA, will be called Slow Coast or San Luis Obispo Coast. Every vineyard is within 5 miles from the Pacific Ocean. It's also the coolest climate for grape growing in the state of California and the longest growing season. So you get a lot of flavor packed, within each gram of sugar, so to speak, so that you have lower alcohols, but without sacrificing flavor. And that's what I love about this particular site, which is west of the Edna Valley. So it's even cooler climate than the Edna Valley is, and it is a really special site.
And it's in a really hilly area there where the Edna Valley is down on an old floodplain, basically, and a lot of vineyard space there is being transferred over right now, actually back to what was originally planted there, which were fruits and vegetables other than grapes, because the soil is so rich that the vines just don't get the struggle that you want them to get to really make these super high quality wines. There are great wines coming out of Edna Valley from those vineyards, but there's definitely a move toward getting at some more of the hillside fruit, getting up off that floor where there's so much rich soil to really get more intensity out of the fruit. It's a really interesting area.
Yeah, well, one thing about the San Diego International Wine Challenge that I don't know, I loved so much was getting to know you and getting to know Robert Whitley, who recently passed away, which is very sad. But when we won a great medal and position as Domestic Wine of the Year for our Chardonnay 2017 vintage, it was awesome. But Robert called me and congratulated me personally, and it's that special personal human touch that really resonated with me, and I felt like I had an immediate connection to Robert. And then I went to San Diego to pour our wines because of that, and so can you talk a little bit about Robert and his legacy as far as wine competitions is concerned?
Absolutely. First off, Robert was a great friend and mentor to me over the years. When he took over what was then the San Diego International Wine Competition, he sort of inherited me along with the package. I was one of the volunteers. I was the cellar master at the time, which meant I was the guy who bent over the most boxes and moved them from point A to point B, I think, was how that went. But he saw right away that it was an interest of mine and was very encouraging to me along the way, and moving me up in the ranks and training me not only in the aspects of how to run competitions, but becoming a better taster and a writer about wines. And was really just a great friend and mentor. He was the first to kind of go out into this specialty area of having specialized panels of judges. The first one that he developed that was different was the Critics Challenge. He and some other wine writers who were friends that were all writing for newspapers realized with the advent of the digital age, that the newspaper game was probably going to end badly for them, being, that once a week column in a newspaper that was looking for places to cut corners. Um, they got together, he and Michael Franz and Michael Apstein got together and started one of the early digital publications about wine called Wine Review Online. And the Critics Challenge was an outgrowth of that, saying, hey, I've got these people who are all writers. This would make a great platform for judging that would we could give something a little bit extra. With that little blurb about a wine in addition to getting a medal and a score. And then adding the Sommelier Challenge, where all of the judges are professional sommeliers coming at it from, again, another angle, just a different way of looking at wines, having to look at restaurant menus and think, how is this going to fit a particular program? And he went out and sought great somms from all over the United States, from some of the higher end restaurants. One of our somms, in fact, our chief somm judge, Jesse Rodriguez, helped build the wine cellar at Addison in San Diego, one of our real top end restaurants at the Grand Del Mar Hotel. So Robert was always on the lookout for really high quality tasters. Again, people that could work in a convivial atmosphere, work together to really help the best things rise to the top. And it's an honor to be in a place to, along with his wife, Diane Salisbury, who's taken over the ownership of it, to continue his legacy and to keep pushing the best wines to the fore.
That's great. I didn't know that she took over. That's awesome. Wow. Well, here's to Robert, right?
Here.
May his legacy live long.
Yes, that is our intent, to continue the work that he started. A big supporter of the wine industry in general, and he and I think, got into it for kind of the same reasons, just a love for the product and a way of giving something back for the lifestyle that good wine provides, for all of us.
Yeah. Well, it really, making wine and dreaming about, the wine that you're going to produce and selling the wine are totally different things. And so having ratings or medals or ways to interface with the consumer when a wine producer cannot be there to sell the wines themselves is a great assistance as far as marketing is concerned, and we've totally benefited from that. I also, I run our wine brand, and I'm in charge of all the things except for winemaking, and that's Marbu. But I do all of the sales and marketing, and it's really important when I work with wholesalers that we have ratings, or that we have, some third party, I guess, authority about the quality of the wine. And there's just, you really can't get around that. I mean, it's something that, especially when you're a new company like we are, Oceano, you have to have these qualifiers when you step out into a new market.
Sure. Yeah, and it's all about how you choose to leverage awards you might win in a competition as part of your marketing program. Our next event coming up here in just a couple of weeks is the Winemaker Challenge. And our chief judge is a guy named Gary Eberly, who's known as the godfather of Paso Robles wine. And Gary is a big believer in competitions and what they can offer to your marketing program. His winery is a smaller side winery, and choosing to leverage those kinds of things can make a big difference in how you get people to come visit you, whether you're just doing sales right out the door, or whether you're trying to get into restaurants. If you can offer those kinds of things that can be, just a little add to a restaurant menu, to say, help move that product, it can be huge for you. But it's all about what you choose to do with it. Some wineries don't enter wine competitions at all. And it's a marketing philosophy that they've chosen. They look at, here's how much we produce, here's what we need to do with it to accomplish our goals as a business, not just as making wine. That's I always like saying that. It's called the wine business for a reason. You have to be able to get that product out into people's hands, and I don't think people realize what all goes into having to get that product from ground to glass, all the steps that have to happen in between. It's really a major undertaking. And wine competitions are still one of the cheapest games in town when it comes to going out and getting a fair accolade for your product. And some people think that, having a group of people agree that a wine is good is probably a better affirmation than having an individual who says a wine is good, unless you've already developed a relationship of sorts with that individual. I say, when people read my reviews, I say, try something that I recommend. And if you like that, then try something else I recommend.
Right.
If I get in, you look at my notes and you say, I don't know what that guy's talking about, then our palates are probably a little bit different, and you should see somebody else.
Right. And that's a normal thing. We all have different palates, and no one tastes something exactly the same way. It's just, we're all made up individually.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I would recommend as well, is also find maybe an expert that you have a similar palate, or, okay, you like the wines that she recommends, or so, that's a good point, so that people should, if you're going to purchase based upon scores, maybe try different reviewers' wines that are recommended, and maybe see who you jive with the most.
I also like to tell people too, one of the publications that I taste for and contribute notes to is something called the California Grapevine. It's the longest continuously running wine publication in the United States. It's run by a guy named Nick Ponomariff. It's here in San Diego. And every year he puts together a batting average page to show wines that are consistently rising to the top across a lot of different competitions, which is a great way to look at it too. If you've got a wine that is consistently getting gold competition after competition after competition, because all of the panels that it goes in front of are different, then you're probably on to something that's going to have pretty wide appeal, and a safe bet, for that gift for your boss.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've actually sent wines to him, and I think I owe him a vintage or something. So I'll have to do that. So, well, for me, it's been a great experience submitting our wines to competitions. Is there a strategy that you could recommend for wineries?
I think it's important to go out early in the game when you have a release. I see a lot of wineries that'll put a wine in a competition just pre-release to sort of test the waters a little bit. And if they score big right away, they know they're on to something, and they could choose to leverage that and go there. They say, once you've got a gold medal, that's what you need to be able to take that wine out into the market, put in your portfolio when you're visiting restaurants to try to sell things. Some people like to be able to show more than that, going across several competitions. We see some wines that improve over the course of a a year or a vintage going from the competitions that happen just after bottling, maybe right up to the next vintage that they're about to release. I can think of one champagne in particular that every time I tasted it, it was better because that bottle shock was starting to settle down. It was
Right.
everything was starting to knit together and integrate as far as characteristics of wood and with a champagne yeast character and how all of that folds together. So we see that happen a lot too. And then you see some of the big players that they just like the big accolades and they're shooting for that winery of the year honor or a wine of the year honor. And they know they're onto something and they're just waiting for the right day to hit.
Right. That's true. It's kind of just throwing it all at the wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
And seeing what happens. So when you're tasting our 2018 Chardonnay, what, as a wine judge, as a reviewer, tell us what you smell and taste.
Well, it's really got a nice, delicate but specific lemon cream note on the nose, a little bit of flint to it, just a real soft element of that. Little faint tropical notes, very elegant on the nose, bright, without no overpowering oak, no overpowering spice. It's very fruit focused. And normally I would, spit things out when I'm tasting them, but I don't need to spit that out. That's very, very drinkable Chardonnay. Again, it's all about the crisp acid profile. It's got some nice tart apple, nice lemon. It's got that acid to be able to cut through a fattier dish, like maybe a really creamy sauce on a halibut fillet.
Right. Yes.
Be beautiful with that. And then there's great finish push to it. That lemon just keeps running after the liquid is gone. Really mouth-watering, delicious. Nothing ponderous, nothing tiresome, like a lot of Chardonnays can get. It's just, after we're done, I'm sure I'll be finishing the bottle with dinner.
Yeah, that's what I was too. Yeah, well, I'm glad that you mentioned the food pairing. That was the next thing that I was going to ask you, is what you would pair with it.
Yeah, I think that could work well. It could easily go with a roast chicken or turkey in addition, and it could handle, some pretty sturdy preps, lots of herb encrusting, those kinds of things, because it's got that great food-friendly acidity that's this wine's not going to get washed away by food. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah. I also think it really pairs nicely with certain types of oysters as well, which is not that common with the Chardonnay.
Right. Because it's so acid driven, that definitely would be a great pair. And it could even handle some of the spicier sauces if you like that with your oysters.
Oh, true. True. Like a spicy mignonette or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, Rich. It's amazing to see you. I look forward to going out to Spanish Springs again this growing season. Do you often go touring in vineyards? Do you go to the Central Coast? You're based in San Diego, is that right?
I do get up that way as often as I can. San Diego's got a growing wine country as well, but I try to make it all around California as much as possible. I did manage to sneak in a few COVID trips, went up to Lodi and out to Calaveras County around Thanksgiving, and was up in Lake County around Christmas time. And you got to get out there and see what people are doing. And that's the great thing about wine, is that it changes year to year, and vineyards age, and winemakers change, and the weather is different. You have all of those factors, so it's always something new.
Well, we make our wine in Napa, so you've been to the vineyard. If you'd ever like to visit Marbu at the winery, please, you have an open invitation to do so.
I would love to. as soon as we get back open, I know I'm planning to go that way. In fact, I know I'm going to be judging up in Petaluma in August, so I might make a few weeks out of that.
That would be awesome, Rich. That would be really great. So I'll let Marbu know, and I know that you're wondering if he might like to do some judging too. So I'll get back to you on that. Yeah, he's really fantastic. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Rich. It's been extremely informative, and keep doing the great work that you and your crew are doing. And so thanks for the support over the last couple of years of our new winery. And I look forward to more in the future, more submissions in the future.
Yeah, thank you for making great wine. That is a pleasure for us to be able to celebrate.
Yeah, awesome. Roxanne said, hold on, Roxanne's back. Very interesting questions, Rachel. Great job, Rich. Roxanne, you're awesome. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Yeah, she is awesome. She's one of our longtime volunteers that helps make sure everything stays exactly the way it's supposed to go and that we get great results.
Nice work, Roxanne. So thanks everyone for tuning in. And if you are seeing this on replay, please, any questions that you might have, type them into the chat and we'll answer them on a timely fashion. Thanks, Rich. Take care. And thanks for taking the time.
Take care. Great to see you. Cheers.
Cheers. Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.